Hi,
Hi Peggy, how are you?
I'm fine, David. How are you?
Good, thank you. Did you know that when you have done your 15,000th interview, all confetti comes down from the ceiling and there's like a
Uh, but then I have to clean it up.
no, they send people in to do that for you at a certain point in your life. And what are some of the things you like to talk about? I'm obviously the single, but I'm quite interested to talk to you about some of the other things that you've been involved in, or even current events and issues, and your point of view on those would be interesting.
Well, the fellow I just interviewed uh, with um, was asking me about protest songs,
Hmm.
and it's a term that I don't use anymore because I feel that uh, we're always saying no, 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 protest singers. And we've got to start thinking about yes, yes, yes is what we want. I'm listening to Bernie Sanders' book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And he's an amazing man. I'm about halfway through the book, and he's talking to me, he's writing about what it's like to be a Democratic senator in the times of Donald Trump and no, Joe Biden, and how to get ourselves free of capitalism, patriarchy, and tackle the one issue. At last, we have one issue that could unite the entire world, no matter what class you are, what gender, what sexual orientation, and all those little things. We have climate change. It is the biggest, the we're ruining the human habitation. We are going to be culled by nature and we are allowing it because there's some people right now who want to make a stack of money. So how do you deal with something as big as that? Uh, and the temptation, I think, is people say, well, it's so big, I just can't think about it. I'll go order something from online or go to a party or I'll get drunk or whatever because it is so big. And trying to make songs where you can hit fence sitters who only have to be pushed a little bit and they'll fall over one way or the other, and how to reassure those who are already doing as much as we can that what we're doing is important, even though it's very small in terms of the big question. Uh, so I'm trying to write songs that aren't, kill the boss, and that aren't the problem is we need unions. And even though one's tempted to write those songs, trying to correlate this issue with this issue and say it's all part of the same thing. I wrote a song called Progress Train, and it's about what progress, growth, and development, which are three words that the minute I hear them, my hair stands on end. And it talks about what, under the banners of progress, growth, and development, are flying. We're doing all kinds of things which people think are good. So the song begins with talking about what progress, growth, and development does to your town. It can ruin a town. It's ruining Oxford right now, which is where I live, literally ruining it. They are in they're competing with Cambridge to be the most important of the university towns. We're also competing with them. We're in the bottom two positions of inequality of the whole country, us and Cambridge. But how to deal with what's happening under those banners? And Progress Train talks about how progress can demolish your town. It can kill the culture in your town. It can just the idea of growth on a planet that has finite resources is nuts. So progress, and then it turns out at the very end that I correlate this with rape, because rape, you cannot say no at a certain point. There's so much violence, you cannot say no to rape. And there's so much violence in progress, growth, and development, different kind of violence. And so at the very end, you say, it's like rape. He wants you, and he wants you now, and he'll have you. And then you say, and they'll have us. They'll have us.
I hear the things that you're saying, but what are the solutions?
The solutions, I think, are to think differently and to treasure what you do, however small, to be part of the change, to bring about the world that we want to live in, however small. Here, all around Oxford, the council is just nipping this bit of Greenland, that bit of Greenland, that bit of Greenland, because it wants to expand Oxford. And this is despite the fact that they say we need the biodiversity. The wildlife corridor is necessary. The quiet that you can find in these green spaces is necessary. And they still want to plonk down housing on it. And then you say, everybody says, but we need housing. But you have to look behind what the need is. I know I'm going into little bits and pieces, and you have to look behind to get knowledge about why something is happening. In this town, they're building science parks, they're expanding the university, they're bringing in all kinds of businesses, which they put on the brownfield land. And there's thousands and thousands of jobs that these are bringing, and they're not building houses. So we need houses. But who's going to say, oh, well, it's because they're bringing so many people in for all these new science projects and everything. And then we say, who do you think is going to get these houses? It's not the homeless that are sleeping on the streets.
So
These are houses where... So looking behind what the story is, I think, is important.
I mean, if you look at, I think it's something that most of us can agree on is climate change. You know, whether you're left, right, in the middle, up or down, most of us realize that climate change is an extremely important issue. But how do you correct the whole situation in a meaningful way? Is there any other way but education?
Probably not. Probably not. But education, if it's a good education, it makes you want to do something about injustice.
If we go back to, I think, the 50s, where there was a lot of resistance to the extent I think they were going to confiscate your passport and effectively kept you out of the United States. I mean, we could go into the whole story, but basically because you had left-wing views and visited China. And I was thinking about that today and how America prides itself on being the bastion of freedom, and yet it was basically trying to suppress you for having views that are a little bit different.
Yes, well, America never kept me out. I could get in again. They tried to get me back so they could take my passport away, but they stopped that. And they stopped that fairly soon after 1959 and 60, when I could come in on a British passport if I wanted.
But the essence of my question was not so much the semantics of that, but the fact that they were basically trying to restrict you because you had different views to them.
Oh, well, don't all governments do that?
Well,
You know, government doesn't.
I mean, in other countries, you're allowed to be a communist or a left winger despite the prevailing wind. But the reason it sort of resonates with me a little bit is because America's always sort of presented itself as the standard for freedom and so on and so forth.
Well, what can I say? They're hypocritical. It's,
Shock
it's,
horror.
and it's the same as our government says that we should treasure the green spaces and yet allows HS2 to plow through, what is it, 17 national parks,
Uh-huh.
they say, and they don't do what they say. That seems to be the rule of governments these days. They
Yeah,
make promises, we believe it, and it doesn't happen.
I don't think much has changed over the last few thousand years, to be fair.
No.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you if you're willing to talk about it in a few minutes' time about your own beliefs about life, but I wanted just to talk briefly about the single because that's kind of why they put you up here. Can you tell us a little bit about the single? The first time ever I saw your face, it's probably one of the most iconic pieces of music out there, but not a lot of people know who that was written about.
Well, there's lots of things that the public doesn't know about. Lots of them don't even know who wrote it. They just listen to it and that's it. I was the face when I was 21, and I'm look at the face now.
You still are the
Well,
face.
I still am the face without a doubt. That's uh, it feels fine to be that. I don't need any recognition for it. I'm very glad not to be famous. Oh, I am so glad not to be famous. It must be awful. Yeah.
Just for the listeners, we should say that the song was written about you by your late, how do you say this? So your later to be husband as he was wooing you, and that was part of his wooing to write the song about you.
Well, he wrote the song and he wasn't going to sing it to me, but I happened to be, we were estranged. I happened at the time to be living in Los Angeles and I needed a cheerful, short love song. And he just said, well, how about this? And he sang it over the phone. And I said, that'll do fine. And I took it and I sang it and he never sang it again. He never sang it again. Although I feel sure that there's a recording of it somewhere that somebody recorded in a club while I wasn't around. No, I don't know. But yes, it
This is
was
a very
fun.
cheeky comment, but probably the CIA have a copy of it.
Who knows? It's a very strong song, David. It has 3 verses. They all begin with the same 5 or 6 words. The first time ever the first time ever, the same 5 words. And then it moves. I mean, Ewan was a quick worker, but in 3 verses, this moves from the first kiss to, no, first seeing, then to the kiss, then to sleeping together. And it's something that so many couples, millions of couples have experienced, and they can apply their own memories to it. It's not telling you how to think, how to feel. It's just stating the bald fact. And that's why I think it has lasted so long. It's it's amazing because it's been covered over 1,000 times, and some of the versions are hilarious. The most hilarious one is my version of it on an album called Folk Exploitation. Have you heard of that?
No, I've seen the one, I forgot the name of the band you did it with, the kind of dance track. I've seen that one.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one.
That's
Yeah.
the farthest away I have gone with it, and you wouldn't even recognize it. It's the song anyway.
Well, you kind of do, but I really admire you for being that game to go that far down that track, to be honest.
Well, why
Yeah.
not? As long as you don't call it folk song, that's fine.
Yeah, you could play that in a vote club, would be brilliant. Can I
But
ask you a little bit about your upbringing and your background, your early background?
Well, I might have to demur and say read the bloomin' book to the audience, because sometimes the answer is too long
Well,
to
sum it up
really.
in 10 words. I mean, how would you sum up your upbringing in 10 words?
Lucky, privileged, unique, warm, loving, free, amazing. And I was a tomboy. Nobody told me I shouldn't be. I, 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 I was rough and tumble. I lived up the pine tree with sandwiches in my hand, waving back and forth at the top of a pine tree. And my mother was teaching piano, and she was watching out the window, and she never said, "Come down off there, 50 feet up." Yeah. I went into jeans very early on. I was allowed more or less to do what I wanted.
Can I ask you, the reason I asked that is my next question is I'm wondering what makes you tick these days and where it comes from.
Well, I've been on stage since I was 19, and I love the feeling that happens in a room full of people, not a stadium full of people, a room full of people, anywhere between 30 people and about 400. That when the music is going just right, all of these people who would have been strangers to each other before then, they become a kind of community. And especially when you get them singing together, it's quite extraordinary what happens when everything goes right. And of course, I mean, I've been to concerts. I remember particularly a Joan Baez concert where it was all women in the audience, and they were standing up and they were waving their arms and singing the songs with her, so that you couldn't hear what she was singing at all. That's another kind of getting everybody together. But what interests me the most, the fact that the songs I sing, the words really matter. And in so many songs, you can feel people taking the words and then applying them to their own lives, and remembering things that happened to them. So they take the song in and they give it their own pictures in their head. The most extraordinary time that happened was when I was singing at my son's school when he was 5. And I sang a song about the man who wants to marry the woman, and she says, "No, there's a wild pig owned by a witch, and you'd have to kill the wild pig in order to have my hand." So he goes and he kills the wild pig, and he comes back and says, "Will you marry me?" She says, "Yes, because you've done what I wanted you to do." And I explained to the children that when I sing this, I see pictures in my head, because I do. When I close my eyes, the pictures are there, usually moving from right to left, occasionally from left to right, or occasionally in from the distance. And at the end of this little session, as I was leaving, a little girl comes up to me and she pulls on my skirt. "Mrs. McCall," she says, "I saw the whole thing happening, and I didn't have to close my eyes." Yeah, she saw it happening in her head. Now, that's when it really hits home, when you take it into yourself. And there have been a number of things like that with school children that have been thrilling, with story songs. So what makes me tick with folk songs, I wasn't, I was part of I was brought up in a class that at that time was called the intelligentsia. That's when they were talking about lower class, middle class, upper class, when they started putting us into categories. And then there was the one called intelligentsia, the ones who live off their brains.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a comfortable upbringing. I wasn't brought up on the front porch of an Appalachian cabin, but I listened to the real singers, the ones who did come from hardship and who did come from the South and who did come from mines and mills. I heard those songs from the very, very little due to the work my mother was doing. And you have to read the book to find out about that. And so these songs by hard times people entered me from the age of 2 or 3 years old. These strange voices singing about hardship and death of their children and the mine closing down and what are they going to do now and they don't get enough wages and union songs. So I feel a responsibility as, for the most part, working class people in America, to my knowledge, are not passing these songs down. I feel a necessity to sing them myself and pass them forward. But of course, I live in the wrong country for that. I should be living in America as I'm singing American songs. So I suppose I have a message, but I don't feel it is my message. I feel it's a message that I'm part of and that I feel needs to be clarified and remembered and applied.
Do you
Where it
feel
can
that
be
you have a purpose in life? Like some people say, my life purpose is. Do you feel that way? That you appear on this earth for a reason? Or do you feel
No,
it's all sort of circumstantial?
it's circumstantial. Yeah.
So
But
how do you make,
there
how
is
do you
a
make,
reason
go ahead,
there
go
is
ahead.
there is a reason why I keep singing the songs very simply. Is because the traditional songs were born simply. They weren't born with complicated accompaniments and sound effects and digital twiddling. They were just the voice and an instrument, or the voice on its own.
If
So
you
for the most
feel
part,
if you feel that life is circumstantial, how do you make sense of it all?
I don't. My favorite word is why. I've no idea what the earth is about. I think it's more magic than we think magical. I think it's I think because as a species we've taken over so many aspects of the world, I think we neglect what the rest of the world is really like. I mean, when I go out with the bird food in the mornings, there are these two blackbirds that come and they sit at my feet. Now, what are they trying to say? They're saying, maybe trying to say, put it in the dish quick, much quicker than you're doing. Or they're not saying thank you. They're just there. And they come close and they know I won't harm them. I won't make any sudden movements. And the minute it's placed up on the wall, bang, they're up there and they're eating it. And to me, that's communication. And sometimes I feel that things are communicating with me. I do. I can kill a house plant quicker than anybody. I don't know why. But I take it outside and plant it, and it's perfectly happy. So I leave it out there. Yeah, I don't cut flowers to bring into the house. I don't approve of cutting flowers to bring them in for yourself. I think that's a dreadful thing to do. To raise them, to cut them, to watch them die. No. Anyway, what makes me tick is music. I'm writing a song now with my daughter-in-law, and to see our minds working together,
Uh-huh.
we're very different in the way we approach music and the way we approach words and chords. And she's very literate musically, and I'm very literate in terms of poetry and the way words fit in, like folk music words fit into folk tunes. So we worked very well together.